And so I'm in the van in the morning, and I look at it, and then, fairly rapidly I realize that there's a tetrahedron on the bottom of it. Okay? This part here is a tetrahedron, if it's seen in 3D. And then I looked up here, and I realized that in 3D, those lines would generate as well a octahedron. See, the thing is that most people don't see this thing as a 3D object. So flatten, it makes not much sense. But in 3D, it describes very specific geometry. So because I had this type of 3D mind, and I was always very intended on not doing the flat thing, I was trying to visualize this in 3D. But I couldn't figure out this middle box thing. I just couldn't figure it out. For weeks, months. Just like, laying in my bed looking at this thing. And studying and all this. And then one day, I said, wait a minute. I realized that one of those boxes in the middle here, okay, matches the box in the top portion of the octahedron. So I thought, what if I slid the middle part box in the upper box and see what it generates? So I split them in two, and then I slid the bottom part into the top part. And when I did so, it was like a key, right? It just locked in and generated all the vectors necessary to have a tetrahedron and an octahedron, one on top of each other. So now I had all these vertices for 3D geometry. These are the only geometry necessary to produce a 64 tetrahedron grid. So I knew I was close. So I got really excited, and I continued studying and intensely studying, and I realized something, is that the Kabbalistic text doesn't say there's one tree at the root of foundation, the foundation of the universe, or at the root of the universe. There is 4 trees at the root of the universe. And they said that the 4 trees were attached at the same root. Now I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe they're still giving us only half the code. Maybe there's 8 trees, and they're only giving us the polarity, the half polarity of the code. I looked at my structure again that I had come up with from sliding the bottom into the top, and I realized I had extra lines. And these extra lines match the lines to generate the star tetrahedron. So if I got all the branches of the tree, and then I attach the 8 trees together, I would have 8 star tetrahedrons coming together to generate the 64 tetrahedron grid. And what told me had decoded this right was that by the time I was finished, I could now plaster the Kabbalistic tree right over top of the 64 tetrahedron grid and get all the 9s of the 2D tree out of the 3D geometry. It worked. And hooked all together, it generated all the intersection necessary to build a 64 tetrahedron grid. And when I calculated this, then I saw that it could be done in many different ways. But one thing that was for sure the Kabbalistic text said, actually, there's 10 spheres. They're called sephiroths. And they come from the word sapphire. Okay? So, actually, it's talking about crystals again. And it says that these sephiroths are the joints between the pathways of creation. And it said that there was this 10 sephiroth to one tree, but because they're all hooked to the same center, to the same root, which is called the crown sephiroth, which is described as a point of indwelling where God falls or God goes towards infinity. Okay? Basically describing a singularity. When they say that, they say that one doesn't count. So you get 9 sephiroth per tree. Well, if you have 8 trees and you've got 9 sephiroth per trees, 8 by 9 is 72. And now you're right back to the 72 powers of God. And the code has brought you all the way back to the beginning in a feedback loop of coding information. And so I continue to find the solution to this. We did a small animation on how the trees come together, and it's literally the trees compressing together, creating that collapse into singularity, generating the code. It's quite amazing. Then it generates all the joints necessary to produce the 64 tetrahedron grid.